And Memorial Day, originally called Decoration Day, is a day of remembrance for those who have died in our nation's service. There are many stories as to its actual beginnings, with over 24 cities and towns laying claim to being the birthplace of Memorial Day. And there is also evidence that organized women's groups in the South that were already decorating graves before the war was even over. As a hymn that was published in 1867 supports, it was called "Kneel Where Our Loves Are Sleeping" by Nella L. Sweet, and it carried the dedication to the ladies of the South who are decorating the graves of the Confederate dead. While Waterloo, New York was officially declared the birthplace of Memorial Day by President Lyndon Johnson in May of '66, it's difficult to prove conclusively the origins of the day. And it's more likely that it had many separate beginnings. Each of those towns and every planned or spontaneous gathering of people to honor the war dead in the 1860s tapped into the general human need to honor our dead, and each contributed honorably to the growing movement that culminated in General Logan giving the official proclamation in 1868. So it's not so important who was the very first. What is important is that Memorial Day was established. Memorial Day is not about division. It's about reconciliation. It's about coming together to honor those who gave their all. Memorial Day was officially proclaimed on May 5th, 1868 by General John Logan, National Commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, in his General Order Number 11, and was first observed on May 30th, 1868, when flowers were placed on the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at Arlington National Cemetery. The first state to officially recognize the holiday was New York in 1873. By 1890, it was recognized by all the northern states. The southern states had refused to acknowledge the day, honoring their dead on a separate day, until after World War I, when the holiday changed from honoring those who died fighting in the Civil War to honoring Americans who died fighting in any war. And it's now celebrated, of course, in almost every state on the last Monday in May. Inspired in the 1915 poem In Flanders Field, Moya Michael replied with her own poem. We cherish, too, the poppy red that grows on fields where valor led. It seems to signal to the skies that blood of heroes never dies. She then conceived of an idea to wear red poppies on Memorial Day in honor of those who died serving the nation during the war. She was the first one to wear one and sold poppies to her friends and co-workers with the money going to benefit servicemen in need. Traditional observances of Memorial Day, though, have diminished over the years. Many Americans nowadays have forgotten the meaning and traditions of Memorial Day. And many cemeteries and graves of the fallen are increasingly ignored, neglected, even vandalized. And most people don't even remember the proper flag etiquette for the day. I know I didn't. I had to Google it to find out what I'm supposed to do. But on Memorial Day, your flag should be at half-staff until noon, and then it should be raised to the top of the staff. Now, while there are towns in our own county here that we know of have Memorial Day parades, many have not had parades in decades. Some people think it's a day for honoring any and all dead, and not just those who are fallen in service to our country. I know my mother and her cousins were that way. We'd go down to southern Ohio and go up in the cemetery on the hill and decorate the graves. They had some Civil War soldiers and their ancestors, but we decorated everybody's grave. And I got the wonderful job as a young child, taking the old clay pots and throwing them over the hill and watching them explode like grenades. Oh, that great fun. But to help re-educate people like me and the rest of America, the true meaning of Memorial Day, the National Monument of Remembrance resolution, was passed on December of 2000, which asks that at 3 p.m. local time for all Americans to voluntarily and informally observe in their own way a moment of remembrance and respect, pausing from whatever they are doing for a moment of silence or listening to taps. Now this year, we mark the 60th anniversary of the end of the Korean War. I know we have a couple of Korean War veterans, Galen, others. Yes. We had a chaplain, well, yes, there you are, okay. Well, at that end, 60 years ago, thousands of our prisoners of war finally came home after years of starvation and hardship, and in some cases, torture. And in one case, one of the homecomings stood out. So as a part of our celebration of Memorial Day, I've been asked to highlight the life of Emil Capone, one of our most recent Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. Most of you may be probably aware maybe of high-profile recipients like Sergeant York from World War I and Jimmy Doolittle from World War II, and even Bucyrus's own Harry L. Martin. Like all Medal of Honor recipients, Capone displayed extraordinary bravery on the battlefield, but with a kind of different twist. Here's the story of this extraordinary Christian soldier. A group of our POWs emerged carrying a large wooden crucifix, nearly 4 foot tall, that I found out from Pat Moore, who sent me a little bit more information about it after I was researching it, or reading what George researched on it, was that Jewish POW named Gerald Fink, who had been captured after Capone's death. And they began hand-carving wood that they would find in the camp, collected firewood or whatever, and carving it and putting the cross on the body and using radio wire for a crown of thorns. And later, a cost of mistreatment by the hands of the communist guards. But it was a tribute to their friend, their chaplain, their fellow prisoner who had touched their souls and saved their lives, Father Emil Capone. The cross is now on display at Capone Mount Carmel High School. This is an amazing story. Father Capone has been called a shepherd in combat boots. His fellow soldiers who felt his grace and mercy called him a saint, a blessing from God. Father, as they called him, was just 35 years old when he died in that hellish prison camp. Capone wanted to serve his country, and for Father Capone, this meant becoming an army chaplain, serving God and country. After the communist invasion of South Korea, he was among the first American troops that hit the beaches and pushed their way north through the hard mountains and bitter cold. In his understated Midwestern way, he wrote home saying, "This outdoor life is quite the thing, and I prefer living in a house once in a while." But he had hoped, saying, "It looks like the war will end soon." But that's when the Chinese forces entered the war with a massive surprise attack, possibly 20,000 soldiers pouring down on a few thousand Americans. In the chaos, dodging bullets and explosions, Father Capone raced between foxholes, out past the front lines and into no man's land, dragging wounded to safety. When his commanders ordered an evacuation, he chose to stay, gathering the injured, tending to their wounds. When the enemy broke through and the combat was hand-to-hand, he carried on, comforting the injured and the dying. offering some measure of peace as they left this earth. Appropriate for Peace with Justice Sunday. When enemy forces bore down, it seemed like the end. That these American wounded soldiers, more than a dozen of them, would be gunned down. But Father Capone spotted a wounded Chinese officer, and he pleaded with this officer and convinced him to call out to his fellow Chinese. And the shooting stopped, and they negotiated a safe surrender, saving those American lives. Then, as Father Capone was being led away, he saw another American wounded, unable to walk, lying in a ditch, defenseless. An enemy soldier was standing over him with a rifle aimed at his head, ready to shoot. And Father Capone marched over and pushed the soldier aside. And then, as the soldier stood stunned, Father Capone carried that wounded soldier American away. This is the battle we honor today. An American soldier who didn't fire a gun, but who wielded the mightiest weapon of all. A love for his brothers so pure that he was willing to die that they might live. And yet the incredible story of Father Capone doesn't end there. He carried that injured American for miles as their captors forced them on a death march. When Father Capone grew tired, he helped the wounded soldier hop along on one foot. And when the other prisoners stumbled, he picked them up. And when they wanted to quit, knowing that stragglers would be shot, he begged them to keep walking. In the camps that winter, deep in the valley, men could freeze to death in their sleep. Father Capone offered them his own clothes, and they starved on tiny rations of millet and corn and birdseed. How he somehow snuck past the guards, foraged in the nearby fields, and returned with rice and potatoes. In desperation, some men hoarded food, but he convinced them to share. Their bodies were ravaged by dysentery, and he grabbed some rocks and pounded metal into pots and boiled clean water. They lived in filth, and he washed their clothes and cleansed their wounds. The guards ridiculed his devotion to the Savior and the Almighty, and they took his clothes and made him stand in the freezing cold for hours. Yet he never lost his faith. If anything, it grew stronger. At night, he'd slip into the huts to lead prisoners in prayer, saying the rosary, administering the sacraments, and offering 3 simple words: God bless you. One of them later said that with his very presence, he could just for a moment turn a mud hut into a cathedral. That spring, he went further. He held an Easter service. When the president met with the Capone family, they showed him something extraordinary. The actual stole, the purple vestment that Father Capone wore when he celebrated Mass inside that prison camp. As the sun rose that Easter Sunday, he put on that purple stole and led dozens of prisoners to the ruins of an old church in the camp. And he read from a prayer missal that they had kept hidden. And he held up a small crucifix that he made out of sticks. And as the guards watched, Father Capone and all the prisoners, men of different faiths, maybe even some men of no faith, sang the Lord's Prayer, "An America the Beautiful." And they sang so loud that other prisoners across the camp not only heard them, they joined in too, filling the valley with song and prayer. That faith, that they might be delivered from evil, that they could make it home, was perhaps the greatest gift to those men. That even amidst such hardship and despair, there could be hope. And in their misery, in their temporal, they could see those truths that are eternal. that even in such a hell, there could be a touch of divine. Looking back, one of them said, that is what kept most of us alive. Yet for Father Capone, the horrific conditions took their toll. Thin, frail, he began to limp with a blood clot in his leg. And then came dysentery, and then pneumonia. And that's when the guards saw their chance to finally rid themselves of this priest and the hope he inspired. They came for him, and over the protest and the tears of the men who loved him, the guards sent him to the death house, a hellhole with no water or food, to be left to die. And yet, even then, his faith held firm. I'm going to where I always wanted to go, he told his brothers. And when I get up there, I'll say a prayer for all of you. And then, as he was taken away, he did something remarkable. He blessed the guards. Forgive them, he said, for they know not what they do. 2 days later, in the house of death, Father Capone breathed his last breath. His body was taken away, his grave unmarked, his remains unrecovered to this day. The war and the awful captivity would drag on for another 2 years, but these men held on, steeled by the memory and moral example of the man they called Father. And on their first day of freedom, in his honor, they carried that beautiful wooden crucifix with them. In their darkest hours in the camp in that valley, these men turned to a song. The words of that song were sustained. These men, all those years ago, are, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. On November 1st, as the Chinese Communist forces viciously attacked friendly elements, Chaplain Capone calmly walked through the withering enemy fire in order to provide comfort and medical aid to his comrades and rescue friendly wounded from no man's land. Chaplain Capone's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the 3rd Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the United States Army.